Um, Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As you know, in just over 2 weeks from now, I will be leaving Liberia for the last time for good, after having spent more than 3 years here serving as the U.S. ambassador. I leave with a great deal of sadness. I have been extraordinarily honored to represent the United States here in Liberia. And I greatly value the friendships and the relationships that I have had the opportunity to develop since I've been here. I've traveled to all 15 counties. I haven't been to every single corner of the country, but I've made a good effort at doing so. And much of that I've traveled by road. So, to really see some of the challenges that people outside of Monrovia face, the challenges that the government faces in terms of trying to help develop this beautiful country. So with that, I will stop, and I'm happy to take your questions.
So you are recognized and you call your name and your institution, Julius.
Yes, I am Julius J. from Fabric Radio. Madam Ambassador, what kind of Liberia did you lead, and what kind of Liberia are you leading?
I have been, from the first time I set foot in Liberia, I've been particularly touched by the warmth and the hospitality of Liberians, and also touched by the challenges, as I said, that to really continuing to move this country in a direction that it needs to go, and continuing to recover, not just from conflict, but from Ebola, which has also made a mark. I will say I'm sad to be leaving at a time where the economic picture is not nearly as bright as it was when I arrived in 2012. And that's, largely due to external factors. It's due to the decrease in iron ore prices. It's due to the decrease in rubber prices. Ebola certainly had an impact on economic growth opportunities. But I am confident that Liberians together possess the capacity and the ability to work together. We saw it during Ebola, the kinds of power of the communities and the grassroots to work together to bring development to the country, because it is not an issue just for the government, it's an issue for the people themselves to take part in.
Yes, just a follow-up. When American ambassadors speak about any country, the rest of the world tends to listen. And in times past, we know that ambassadors of the U.S. to Liberia have been critical of actions and things done by the Liberian government. But what I've come to notice is you are more easy when it comes to talking about the issues that confront this country. Why aren't you taking a stern position against the government?
Well, we never start out with a position of take a position against a government. We have a bilateral relationship to nurture and protect. That said, we have very frank discussions. I think if you were to ask President Sirleaf, she has heard some very frank conversations from me. Sometimes doing that in public is not the best way to actually achieve results. That said, if you go back over my body of work, if you will, in terms of conversations and interviews and other interactions with the media, speeches that I have made, we have been quite clear about the need to do more to fight corruption. I have been very clear about the need to look at restructuring the economy to ensure that you're moving away from a concessions-based economy in an effort to build more private sector activity that will benefit a greater number of people. So, there are ways to go about criticizing. Criticizing for the sake of criticizing does no one any good. What you need to do is work together to identify the problems and to figure out solutions.
Thank you. My name is Ambassador. I'm former command report for Truth FM and Real TV. First, what do you make of the latest reports coming from Transparency International concerning Liberia? And secondly, as you leave Liberia, the entire country is being characterized by mob violence all around the place. Has it claimed the attention of the U.S. Embassy or the government?
On the first issue, if the latest transparency point really doesn't necessarily address the issue of actual corruption, it addresses the perception of the population about corruption. And I think in that respect, it is probably true. I mean, as I travel through the country and I talk to people, corruption is an issue that people raise in many different ways, which says to me this is not just an issue for the government itself to solve. Every individual in Liberia has a role to play in fighting corruption. You know, saying something when someone wants to pay for grades at the school level, saying something if you're going to, conduct a transaction with a business and somebody wants to add a little bit to the bill and you agree to take your cut. I mean, there are things that everybody needs to do. The government needs to do more on the prosecution side. They need to continue to do a better job of holding people accountable. But there's also a subset of that where the judiciary has to be able to hear those cases and move them. You need to have hard evidence of corruption. Simply saying that someone is corrupt doesn't make them so and is not enough evidence to hold up in a court of law to hold them accountable. So certainly the perception, I think it's a very accurate report in that regard, that people perceive that corruption is an issue and is a problem in Liberia. But there has been progress, and there needs to be more progress. And one of the ways to do that is to continue to report on it, to shine a light on it, but to do it in a responsible way, to have evidence, to have proof, to have an indication that someone is engaged in inappropriate activity. And as for mob violence, yes, it continues to be a concern for us and others, and I think for Liberians themselves to see how quickly some of these incidents can spin out of control. But again, I go back to this need for personal and community responsibility, that each citizen has a role to play in ensuring security and stability of the state. The government and the security forces have a certain role to play, but they cannot be in every single location. And so it's really incumbent on communities and counties and districts to develop their own mechanisms to ensure that people don't allow these kinds of events to spin out of control. Because when they happen and they end up in either injuries or death to individuals or destruction of property, you're only hurting yourselves. You're not necessarily hurting the target of that anger.
But gender balance, take
Well, firstly, my name is Betty, and I'm from Front Page Africa. I'm concerned on the issue of security as on your drawdown. What do you think?
We have confidence that over time that the government and the people of Liberia are developing the mechanisms and the systems and the institutions to assume responsibility for their own security. And that really is something that has to happen. It's been a long time coming. UNMIL has been here now for 12 years, almost 13 years. That's a long time for a peacekeeping mission. And over the last several years, their actual role in terms of maintaining security in the country has really been diminishing. You see them around, but they've been drawing down gradually over the last couple of years. So it's an inevitable process. It's something that has to happen. The UN works with the Liberia National Police. We, of course, have been working with the Armed Forces of Liberia. We work with the Drug Enforcement Agency. Other partners are working with BIN. They are gradually developing capacity to take on responsibilities. We've seen some progress with the LNP. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, particularly at the level of local police officers. But we've seen changes in the leadership that have been positive in the LNP with people who have received professional police training. Excuse me. Do we have any water?
Yes.
Sorry.
Water.
Oh, thank you. So there's more. It's a work in progress, but we are confident, and we saw some of this in the way the police and the military were able to carry out certain tasks during the course of the Ebola response, planning for accompanying dead body burial teams, and continuing to scale that up and get people out into the field where they need to go. What we clearly need to see happen is have a decongestion of police and security forces out of Monrovia, because we need to get them closer to the people in the counties. But we are confident that this can happen and can happen smoothly. But I go back to the point I've already made twice, which is it's incumbent on all Liberians as well to play a role, to signal when there's a problem, to work constructively with one another to ensure that the peace and stability that I think everyone has come to enjoy over the last more than 12 years really values. Excuse me.
Yes, Madam Ambassador, I'm Baron Brown from Power Team. A few days from now, I know you'll be in the United States of America. But what kind of leader you think the American government would love to work with after the 2017 general and presidential elections in this country? And my second question, there have been this perception in Liberia, most from Liberians, that our elections process has been stage managed by a country, meaning it's a country that decides the fate of Liberia who becomes president. How best do you do that?
Well, I would say, it's very amusing, but it's absolutely untrue. The United States government does not endorse candidates. We do not select candidates. We endorse the process. We are very much about support for the democratic process, for free, transparent elections. The choice of who will lead Liberia is up to the people of Liberia to determine among those who put themselves forward in a desire to represent you. We as the U.S. government will, with maybe a very few exceptions, work with whoever a country elects as their leader. I mean, there are always instances somewhere in the world, depending on particular policies or things that they may be doing. But again, we do not give secret handshakes. We do not give secret or public endorsements to any candidate. We do encourage all candidates, if I meet with them, if the next ambassador meets with them, our message to them is always to control your followers, conduct your campaign peacefully, don't create unnecessary tensions where you don't need to have them, and behave responsibly. Participate in the process, support the process transparently and freely.
And the next question. Kind of leader in the American government to work with?
We will work with whoever is elected by the Liberian people. What we do hope is that whoever is elected is someone who will continue to move Liberia on the path of democracy, free market principles, towards prosperity.
Frederick.
Yes. Madam Ambassador, I'm Frederick here from the Hebrew Files Daily newspaper. During your stay, the embassy helped in strengthening all sectors. When it comes to the media, what can you say about it as you lead?
What can I say about it in terms of what we've done to help the media?
Yes.
Well, we have done a lot of work, both through our public affairs section and through USAID. We provide training for the media in many different ways. And I know that there are other partners as well with Liberia who are also providing assistance or working to build the capacity and the responsibility of the media here. I think there has been some improvement, but you all have heard me many times since I've been here. There's a fine line between freedom of the press and printing sensational news, making things up, presenting things as fact. With the freedom that Liberia has, and I know members of the PUL and others quibble with me on this issue, but you have a very free media environment here. People can pretty much say whatever they want. They can print it, they can publish it, they can broadcast it. more so than many places I have been in Africa. But with that comes a huge, huge responsibility to do so, to express yourselves responsibly. So you played a very responsible role during Ebola in terms of putting out good information, trying very hard to make sure you were helping the public understand what was going on instead of scaring people. It's that kind of responsibility and sometimes self-censorship that is really necessary to show that there's a truly professional media. So, investigative reporting doesn't necessarily equal sensationalism. Sometimes you're going to go and do an investigation and you're really not going to find anything. Other times you will. But again, I would just encourage you all to continue on the path. We have seen improvement. There's continued maturation of the media, but there's still more to be done.
Okay. Ambassador, I'm Joaquin Sendero. I report for the Daily Observer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Most times I hear you expressing sympathism for the government in terms of development, looking at the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you have some assumption to make when it comes to the time development will be, achieved in Liberia at a 4-year level. So what time can you presume for Liberian to be developed the way maybe it would be La Monrovia will maybe appear like Silver Spring or Minneapolis?
Well, that may not be the objective you want for Liberia, right? I'm not sure I can put a timeline on it because there are so many factors that go into an issue of into creating development within a country. Because again, it is not just the government's role, and the government is not going to bring development to Liberia. The U.S. government isn't going to bring development to Liberia. We will support. The government should create an environment to support Liberians to build development, to build their own country. So it's and that, as we've seen, for example, external shocks can really have an effect on the economy in the country and on the budget in a country. Some of those are unpredictable. Some of those are things that really are beyond anyone's control. But it's going to take time. It takes time to build or rebuild infrastructure. It takes time to fix an education system. It's a generational issue. You don't improve the schools from one year to the next. It's just not possible. It takes time to educate those children who are coming through the system. So many of these things are long-term challenges. But is it 15 years? Is it 30 years? Is it 20 years? I wouldn't even venture a guess. But what you do need is the commitment of everyone to work with whoever's in the government, all parts of the government, but also within the private sector, to invest in your own country.
Madam Ambassador, my name is Jonathan Brisby from LDS.
Excuse me.
Our government has been supportive of Liberia over the years, especially your 3 years being in Liberia. What do you see from the security sector, education, health, agriculture, that support? Do you see a matching development in Liberia?
Let me see if I understand your question. So is your question that the investments that the U.S. government has made through our various assistance programs, are we seeing results for that? Yes. I would say yes. A lot of what we do through our assistance programs now through the U.S. government, and this has been the case for probably the last 15 or 20 years, is very little related to infrastructure and much more related to human capacity development, strengthening of institutions, because it's institutions that really are important in a country. It's not so much who's in those institutions at any one time. So as a result, some of that is not immediately noticeable by the general population, right? As opposed to if you build a building, people see it and they go, oh, we know that the U.S. government built that building, right? So from our perspective, in terms of the investments that we have made in the many different areas that we are engaged in Liberia, we have definitely seen progress. We have seen good results from our programs. Does that mean that everything has moved as quickly as we would like, or there has been as much progress as we would have hoped for? Excuse me. Probably not in some cases. There's a lot. We've been a big investor. We've been the largest bilateral partner in the education sector, really looking at primary education mostly. And we, despite the concerns about the sector, we have seen progress in that small portion of the overall education system, but we recognize that there is still a lot more that needs to be done, and we cannot be the only one responsible for that. So I would argue that we have made progress. We've helped to build for Liberia a very professional armed forces that understands its role, that is subject to civilian rule, that is under Liberian leadership. Again, that's an intangible in some ways, but we're very pleased with the way that that progress has come about.
Alice.
Madam Ambassador, my name is Alice Tupa, New Republic. Peace and reconciliation are primary concern to Liberians. But most importantly, Liberians are concerned about the issue of adhering to the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, particularly the one that calls for the establishment of War Crime Court. Do you, or does the American government share this view that indeed the establishment of a court to try pursue war law can speak to this issue? Do you share?
We don't take a position on the issue. It's an issue for Liberians to decide. Every country that has come out of conflict has chosen different ways to work on reconciliation, to work on transitional justice, to address those issues. We understand that there is a discussion ongoing, but it's ultimately a decision for all Liberians to decide. And I can tell you that in the time I've been here, as I've traveled around, I talk to different when I talk to Liberians, I get multiple answers about whether or not that's the right way to move ahead. So in some ways, without a clear majority view about this is the course of action, whether it's a war crimes court or not to have a court or to pursue some other path towards reconciliation, it's very difficult for a government or even as a society to say, this is what we're going to do. Because I'm not sure that what is discussed in Monrovia is necessarily the same view that's held when you go outside to the counties and talk to people. I have seen, at least in some areas, far less interest in holding a war crimes court and more interest in greater development, more access to government services. So it really varies. But again, and I know people think it's a cop-out when I say this, but it's for Liberians to decide. Having a conversation, and a healthy conversation, a disciplined, civil, nonviolent conversation about alternatives is certainly something that Liberians should feel free to engage in. But at the end of the day, the country will have to decide what's the best path forward for the majority of the people.
Nikos.
Yeah. Thank you. Madam Ambassador, my name is Nikos Andrews. I write for a news newspaper. I have two questions. One is a follow-up to my colleague's question. The first one is, you live in Liberia. You've been here for a little over 3 years now, and you're living. You've observed the situation here in Liberia. What will you be suggesting the person who is taking over you as a challenge for this country that you think can work with as an ambassador that will be taking over you to implement what you left? And then the second one is, do you support or do you share with Liberians' view that those who committed crimes against humanity should be brought to book?
Well, I've already given you my answer on this issue of holding people accountable. There are different ways to hold people accountable for actions that they may have been engaged in, and the mechanism for doing that is, again, there are different ways to do it, and the people of Liberia will have to decide what's the most appropriate way to hold people responsible for activities. As for the advice or the information, what I will say to my successor. Obviously, I'm leaving right on the cusp, of an electoral cycle, the drawdown of the closure of UNMIL. There are a lot of things that are going to be happening over the next few years that my successor will obviously have to look at and watch carefully. It will be a very interesting time. I'm sad to be leaving. I would love to be here to follow all of what is going to go on in Liberia, and I will be watching from my next post and paying very close attention. But really, to look out this concern of how is the security transition going, the movement from an UNMIL peacekeeping mission to a more normal UN presence. I mean, UNMIL is closing, but the UN is going to still be here and will still be doing some of the tasks and performing some of the programming that UNMIL has had up until now. And we, of course, the United States government will continue to be here along with other partners who provide support to the electoral process, and work with civil society organizations and in all the other areas that we invest in. So it will really be to sort of help the person understand the landscape in Liberia, the challenges, the concerns, particularly what I've heard from individual Liberians as I've traveled around. I know the security transition is a concern. I will say this. We have absolutely no doubt, however, that in terms of the election, that there is capacity in the country, in the NEC, to conduct an election. Resources are always a challenge related to having sufficient resources and logistics to get out to every corner of the country. And that's a place where they are likely going to need some assistance from the international community to do. But in terms of being able to, the mechanisms of the election, the capacity exists in Liberia. They've run several elections. We're very pleased with the way the progress that the NEC has made. What is unfortunate is that there could be individuals who seek to subvert that process. And that's the thing that people need to watch out for, is people who try to, for their own political or personal gain or advantage, will try to subvert the electoral process.
Yeah.
My name is Amelia and I report for Radio Americas. I'm still concerned about the security sector. Maybe I'll make you bring you back. Earlier when I heard you say that the government is satisfied with the work that's being done within the army. But of recent, we've been following reports, we've been hearing about the police, and the use of police. So what do you envisage for the new army that have been trained by your government in your own view? Are they capable of taking care of security of your family within the country?
Well, the Armed Forces of Liberia's role, as set out in the National Defense Policy and the government's national security strategy, is not to provide internal security, it's to provide external security, so against external threats. Are they capable of doing that? Certainly. Fortunately, we don't foresee that there's any external threat, but you never know that. They do have a role to play in extremis, in a severe situation where they may need to be a backup to the police if the police are incapable of handling a situation. But their primary role should not be, and is not currently considered to be, an internal security role. So it really is incumbent on all of us to work together to continue to work to build the capacity of the police. We understand that the LNP has challenges. We have, we hear about the officers in the street who take bribes, and other criticisms. They have a long way to go still to build that trust with the communities. But one way to start really working on that issue is to send people out of Monrovia, send them into the communities, be there so that people in Riversess don't have to wait days before there's a response if something happens. So pushing them out, helping them live in the communities with people so that you build some of these relationships. It's going to be a challenge. It's difficult when you have police officers who are not well paid. It's all issues that come down, in some instances, come down to resources. So you were right when I said there has been progress, and we're pleased to see the progress. Is there more to be done? Most definitely. And we will continue to be engaged in working with the police. We are, other partners are working with BIN as well to develop their capacity and get them out to the border posts where they need to be. But it's going to take time. It's going to take time.
Yes, I have two questions. One is the issue of the court system, wherein they have been accused of continuous bribery, wherein cases have been adjudged because of someone has been paid. Yeah. And then another question is the issue of the economy. What do you think of the flow of our country's economy?
Like all the institutions in Liberia, the judiciary is an institution that continues to need strengthening and improvement. I do think that the current Chief Justice has made an effort to try to start to hold some of the magistrates and judges accountable. Is there more that needs to be done? Certainly. But the issue is at all levels. If you talk about corruption in the judiciary, it's not necessarily, in some cases, it may not be the judges or the magistrates, it's the lawyers or the defendants themselves or lots of different people, unfortunately, are engaged in activities that shouldn't be tolerated. But to wipe that out completely takes time because you have to build the human capacity, right? You need to have well-trained judges, you need to have well-trained magistrates, you need to have court defenders and public defenders and prosecutors and people who are genuinely interested in doing the right thing. And it comes back to this point of personal responsibility at the end of the day. Each Liberian has to know what's the right thing to do in any circumstance. And it's easier when people are watching, but when people aren't watching, you still have to do the right thing. That takes a long time to root it out from top to bottom. But I do believe that has been progress, but it's still an institution sort of from top to bottom that needs further work to ensure that at least through the formal system that there's access to justice for citizens. And I'm sorry, you had the economy. It's very hard after all the work we all did together to kick Ebola out to be facing a situation where the economic outlook is as gloomy as it is. Again, revenues are down to the government because the iron ore prices are down. Rubber, your two biggest exports that earn money for the country to be plowed back into the budget, there's just going to be less of it, and that's not something that is the government itself can do much about. What they have to do is continue to learn how to live within its means, if you will. But it's a very small budget, even under the best of circumstances. And and a significant portion of that budget goes just to pay civil service salaries. Doesn't leave a lot to put into operations or investments into infrastructure. And I think more than anything, the government needs Liberians to pull together and figure out what is possible within the very narrow budget window that you envelope that you have. One of the key things is private sector development. Individual entrepreneurs, people who look for opportunities to build a private sector, because the real way to bring development or develop Liberia is through the private sector. Those are the job creators. No government in any country can do that ultimately. So we certainly are investing in programs to help micro, small, medium enterprises. There are a number of other partners who are doing that. The government says they're going to try to spend more time focused on this. And certainly within agriculture, it's a sector where there's a lot of opportunity. And I don't mean, when I say agriculture, rubber or, rubber or timber necessarily. You're talking about, either food crops, which would be, amazing if you all could grow enough food to feed yourselves and not have to go and import it all. There's a lot of processing those items as well. So there's going to be going to be some hard work that needs to take place in the next couple of years in order to ensure that some of the promises made can be delivered.
Yeah, Madam Ambassador, my name is Mano Weeding, and I come from the Heritage newspaper. I want to know what has been your most memorable movement as ambassador here, and what have been your key challenges while serving?
Well, there have been a lot of moments over the last 3 years that I will remember when I leave here. But I think I have to say that probably I would have to say May 9th of this year, when after everything that we all went through and experienced last year at the height of the Ebola outbreak, the fear, the death, all of the difficulties that the society, that the country went through. And if those of you remember how bad it was in August, there were days where, despite what I was saying publicly, we're going to get there, we're going to do this, what we were all saying to keep our spirits up. There were days when, just like I'm sure all of you or many of you, we were like, we're not so sure, because it seemed very grim. So reaching that point on May 9th, to show what we all together did to kick out Ebola was really something I think that was probably something I'm happiest about. And one of my fondest memories is to see, as we traveled around the city and saw Liberians, just in a very different mood than what had prevailed for so long. It was a huge accomplishment. I mean, this was a historic event. There are a lot of other, as I say, a lot of other things I'm happy about or I'm proud about or things that I will remember. But that one, I think, more than anything, because it was really an emotional reaction, is one that I will remember for a long, long time.
Any challenges?
Well, as I said, I've traveled by road through Liberia. I've been in some of these places where the roads get shut down by mud. I've traveled in the rainy season. I see what people deal with. I also, in the few times that I have flown over the country, you see that, one, the beauty of the country, but the real challenge of opening roads, of conducting large-scale agriculture. I mean, you look at all the forests and the jungle and how quickly things grow back, and just the sheer determination it takes to clear land and put down grow crops. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in that regard. I have experienced the inability to be connected by cell phone anywhere in certain parts of this country because there are no cell towers to provide communication. No power. I mean, I understand sort of all of the things that are constraints on moving the country forward. We talk about private sector, but to run a business, you need certain things to be able to make it a success. So that's one of the challenges, is just the infrastructure, the physical environment. It's on the ocean, particularly down in Monrovia, on the ocean. The sea air. It's hard to keep things functioning. So you have those sort of physical environment challenges. Challenges of things never move as fast as anybody would like them to go. And in a way, I think the reason is because Liberians like to talk. And so, everything takes a little bit more conversation to get moving. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But once you understand that and accept it, you realize, okay, maybe it should only take this long, but it's probably going to take, add a factor of whatever. But that gives people an opportunity to share their views and to be heard. And then it moves on.
Okay, that's my last question, and it's about gender equality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from the onset of Madam Ellen Johnson study for administration, this issue of gender inequality has been reported in Liberia, that Liberian women are marginalized and so forth. Even though a female is president of this country, with too many ministers, schools are all open and women are thinking good number now than men, but still the report of gender inequality continue to mount in Liberia, that the gender is not balanced and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you buy this idea? And if it is, then what would be, from your own assessment, be responsible for the gender inequality that continues to exist here despite the number of ministers, female ministers and female presidents that we have?
Well, I'm sad to say that I, in fact, do believe that the status of women in Liberia continues to be not where it should be. People look at the fact that you have a female president and they think, oh, everything must be wonderful for women in Liberia. Well, it's not. One president and a few ministers does not, a gender equal society make. Women are still marginalized. Women are the ones who do a lion's share of the work. They got to earn the money for the family, and then they got to go home and they got to take care of the family. You look at the statistics of gender-based violence. That in and of itself is an indication that people do not treat women with respect that they deserve. So there is a lot of work to be done. The number of women in politics is diminishing. It's not going up, which would be an indication of greater participation. It's going down. I would argue if you could find the data to say women's formal participation in the economy, the numbers of women are probably relatively small in the private sector who are actually, we know in the informal sector, it's a lot of the women. It's the market women. It's the people who are going out and selling whatever little bit they have to sell in the marketplace, cooking food, doing whatever. So they are actually more economically active than is reflected in the data. So, but it's an issue that the government itself can't solve. They can pass laws and they can set up environments. But at the end of the day, we need men and women together to work on this issue. Each man needs to examine his or himself about where he stands and how he treats women, because it's your mother, your daughter, your sister, your cousin, your granny. Think about that, because we wouldn't be having this conversation if things are good. And I have to say, I'm very, very afraid of what happens, after President Sirleaf leaves, in the sense of for gender issues, because people do tend to say, "Oh, we have a female president, so everything is okay." It's not okay. There's more work to be done, and it takes each one of you to work on the issue.
Is it that a man stopping them from doing what they're supposed to do?
Is it that
the men are the problem to their success in?
Well, I will tell you this. I've had a couple of male politicians while I'm here tell me that they can hardly wait for there not to be a female president any longer, because then the men can resume their rightful place. Now, I'm sorry, but I hear that these were a couple of elected officials who said this in different points in time. Why they would say it to the American ambassador, I'm not sure, but they did. But the bigger point is that I'm sure if I talk to men, just your average person in certain parts of the country, I would probably get a very similar point of view. That says to me there's more work that needs to be done. It's not just about passing laws. It's not just about, it's about walking the walk, as they say, actually ensuring that women and girls have the same opportunities that boys and men have.
Take the last
Ambassador, finally from my end, first from your assessment and evaluation as you leave your office, I think what score or mark will you give the President Salif government? And secondly, tell us, why was Senator Joa Howard Taylor denied a visa to the U.S.? Is she still a threat to that government, or perhaps the U.S.? We do not discuss individual visa cases. It's a privacy issue. We don't do that for anyone. So I'm not even going to respond to that question. On the first question, we don't give grades to governments. We have to work with, we're represented, we send ambassadors to countries, and we have all kinds of relationships with countries, from good to bad to warm to close. And so we work with the governments that are in place. We believe, the U.S. government believes, that there has been progress in Liberia since in the last 10 years. Is there more that needs to be done? Most definitely. There's a lot more work. Some of these things are things that will take time, no matter who's in office, because, as we said, the education system, for example, things like this take time to develop. You don't rebuild them or build them anew overnight. But we are very pleased with the relationship that we have with the government. Despite what one of the earlier questioners intimated, we have very frank exchanges of views. We express when we're unhappy with something, whether something we offer advice and support as needed. But nothing is to be gained by, being in a confrontational mode with a government or with a country. We can get a lot more done by continuing to have a dialogue about opportunities and how we can support continued progress. The U.S. government's investment in Liberia has been significant since the end of the war. We want Liberia to succeed. That's our goal, is to be able to put ourselves out of the assistance business and have, because you don't need us any longer in terms of providing aid, but that we can work on a footing where you have economic prosperity and opportunity for all Liberians. So that's really our objective here, is to ensure that Liberia succeeds. And we will continue to be side by side with Liberia as we go forward to try to do what we can to support those efforts.
Yes,
question.
And it's the last one.
So the first member asked the first question.
And the last.
I don't know, none of the women ever.
And it is going to be on a lighter note. I see you wearing something that looks African. Mm-hmm. What is that one moment that is ingrained upon your mind about Liberia, that everywhere you go, you always think about it, and it will bring you fond memories about our country that makes it good to you?
Well, anybody who's followed me in the whole time I'm here is, I'm known in some circles as the dancing ambassador. So, it's the music. I go everywhere I go, and you can ask if there's drums or there's music. I'm dancing, and so it's that sort of the joy that I'm always struck with whenever there are more than just a handful of Liberians together and the music comes out. So
Again, it ends up coming back to where I started, the warmth and the hospitality of the Liberians. I mean, I continue to be touched by that, and it's something that I will long remember. I hope I will come back at some point to visit, to see what progress the country has made. But that's probably it. It's the Liberian people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.